Bert's Outdoor Adventures here, doing something a little bit different today. Gonna do a little maintenance job on the Honda Pilot. So figured I'd do a little video to show you how to change brake pads. And also I have a sway bar link that is going bad. So these are the parts, some ceramic brake pads from Duralast. You can get those at AutoZone. And this is a Honda sway bar link. It's just pretty basic. So anyway, without further ado, I'll jump right into it and show you guys how to do it. Jumping into the brake pads. 17mm socket will loosen these two bolts. For the sake of time, I've gone ahead and broken them loose a little bit so it won't take forever. So you just want to work these loose. To just do the pads, you only need to remove this top bolt, and there's a bottom bolt down here. If you're going to do the actual entire brake rotor, you'd need to remove the inner bolts that remove this entire caliper off of the rotor to pull the rotor. But the rotors are fine, so we're just going to put new pads on. Next thing you want to do is just wiggle this caliper clamp off. Oop, there comes the pads. Set it up here. Don't ever want to let it hang down because you can damage your brake line. So now we'll, oh, look at that. There was a lizard inside of that brake caliper. Bad day for him. Alright, so the brake pads just pop right out. On this one, the brake pad with the indicator, which is what squeaks when the brake pad wears down enough where it starts to touch that, it's there to tell you, hey, replace your brake pads. But if you let it get that far, they're pretty bad. So, just want to make sure that you have a clean surface to work with here. Clean out these guys where the pads go in, make sure there's no debris in there. Alright, so new pads. Indicator side goes on the inside on this one. I don't really think it matters per se, but that's where it was before, so I'm going to make it match. Front one slides right in. Now you have these retaining springs that you need to make sure and put in. There's a little hole, here, I'll show you. There's a little hole, you can see that or not, at the top of the brake pad, and there's one at the bottom of the brake pad. Those are there for the springs for the retainer. It's just a little spring to hold tension on the pads is all. So make sure that you get those in there. Basically pop one in and hold it and pop the other one in. Brighter over here. Now when you get them in, they're going to want to kind of run away from you, so it's a little tricky. You have to kind of hold them in place, work the other one in. One closest to me in there. And then the one furthest away. Okay. Now this is the tricky part. Actually, yeah, they're going to want to try and expand on me. So you know what? Probably going to have to, next step, I might have to put the springs back in because they might not stay. Next step is to grab some kind of device to turn your rotors back, or your rotor pistons back in, because basically as the brakes wear out, the pistons start to work their way out to adapt or to adjust for the loss of brake pad. So you need a device to turn those back in. I use just a simple C-clamp, and basically you just want to start pushing them back in. I've opened the hood and also opened the reservoir cap for the brake fluid so we don't have any issues with back pressure. You just want to do this nice and easy. You don't want to overflow the brake fluid reservoir. I know there's other ways to do it, but this is the way I've always done it. I'm sure they make a specialty tool for this, but I'm not a mechanic, so I don't have it. Just want to get both of these to go in. Now you'll see that once you get them both going in, there will be a point where they basically start to kind of push out on each other. If you want to get them to go in as far as possible, because with these new pads being a lot larger than the older ones, they're going to tend to want to pull, or it's going to be a very tight fit. So just going to try and get them as far in as we can. And I can see the one closest to me now starting to work its way out a little bit, because it's basically the fluid inside of this caliper is going back and forth. So get it in as far as we can get it, And then what I did on the other side, which I didn't video that one, but what I did was just basically, once they get in that far, you can kind of push them with your hand to try and get them where you want them. The idea here is just to try and get them as even as possible and just make sure that they're pushed in enough where they're going to stay put. Okay, so now I got the bottom started. I'm going to work my way to the top and try and make sure that spring stays in place so it doesn't pop out of there, because that's what's, you want to keep that spring in there. Almost got it. Alright, we got it. Just got to line it up a little bit better. It's a tight fit, so that's to be expected. Okay, all the springs are in place, the pads are in place, the caliper's in place. Now we're just going to take these 17mm screws back again and put them in one by one. Start them. Sometimes it takes a little wiggling to get it to line up just right. There we go. I think. Yep. Okay, start the bottom one. See, it's really not that difficult of a job. And I don't know exactly what your mechanic would charge you to do this, but it's going to be, labor I think is at least 170 just to start for an hour. I believe that's a pretty typical labor rate. So if you have some basic tools, a jack to jack the car up, things like that, and just some simple know-how, you can save yourself a lot of money, and you can also learn how to do something fun. But someone to get started for me. I'm trying to get it lined up just right. There it goes. Alright, so I'm getting this tightened up now. Move this light around a little bit so you can see what we're doing. We're just tightening up this bottom screw. Get it as tight as we can without going too crazy. We'll come up back up and do the top. Okay. Almost there. Oops. Okay. So that's it. Brake pads are done. I know that only took me, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes. So, like I said, with the right tools, a little bit of know-how, anybody can do this job. It's really not that difficult. And like I said, it'll save you a lot of money. And you get the satisfaction of knowing how to do something. So, all right, the second part here is that we're gonna do this. Like I said, this is the sway bar link. When I was driving down the road, I felt like when I went over some bumps, I could hear some noises. So, this is the sway bar link from my driver's side. So I noticed driving down the road that I would hear some squeaking going on whenever I hit some bumps. And when I was just at Honda to have my transmission fluid changed, they did an inspection like they always do, and they said your sway bar links are shot. So this is the top part of the sway bar link. As you can see, it's difficult to move, but it does move very difficultly, but that's the way it should be. There's oil in here, or grease in here, that basically lubricates and keeps that thing solid. Now this was the bottom part. Watch this. Not only is the boot ripped, so there's a big hole in it, but it just wiggles all around. You can see that it has reverberation even to it. So I'm pretty sure that's what the issue was, or at least it's part of the issue. So these were $39, I think, from Honda. I would recommend getting the Honda ones. The reviews I read online of off-market brands, or aftermarket brands, were that they weren't as good. So for 39 bucks from Honda, that's actually pretty reasonable for a dealer OEM part. Just gonna swap them out. So anyway, this is the new one. The part number for this one for a 2013 Honda Pilot, and this is the EXL trim level, is 51320-SOX-C01. And these are left and right are the same, so they're universal as far as just being front sway bar links. I haven't gotten the rear ones yet, but if the rear ones, when I inspect them, if they look like they need to be replaced, I'll get those as well. So just to kind of show you the way these should work, is they're very, very stiff. There it goes. that's how much pressure it took to move it. Now they're of course factory, so they're really stiff right now, but you really have to kind of break them loose. That's the way they should be. And there's grease inside this rubber that keeps it nice and good. So anyway, we're gonna get right to it. I'm gonna start removing the old one. Same size socket. It's a 17 millimeter. Okay. Felt it break loose. Yep, there it goes. That wasn't too bad. Now I'm gonna switch over to my socket so I can be a little bit faster with removing it. For the sake of time. Now, one thing I want to show you, and I'm not sure it's going to do it on this one. Yeah, it looks like it is. Okay, so there is a Allen wrench innard of this thing that needs to. So on the other side, it was spinning freely when I was trying to spin this. As you can see, this whole thing is spinning. So when you get to a certain point, you need to use an Allen wrench, stick in there to hold it in place, and then take your 17 millimeter open end wrench, and then work it loose. You have to basically just kind of spin it within that to get it to come loose. I'm not sure why they have it like that, but there's a little bit more corrosion in this top one than so on the other side there really wasn't any corrosion on the bottom nut, but on the top nut there was. So the top one was the one I had a hard time with. Hopefully we don't run into that on the other side, or on the bottom of this side, because that'll be a little bit trickier to get to. But basically just working it off this way now because it's almost spin freely. And we're almost there. And there we go. We got it loose. There we go. So that guy is free. All we have to do is remove the bottom one. There we go. Now it's really going. There we go. Okay, now we've got it where it's almost loose enough to loosen with our fingers, but we'll just go a socket on it for the sake of time. There we go. Okay. As you can see. Okay, we got it out. So this one is not as bad as the other side. It's a lot more movement than it should have, I think. But the rubber is still intact. So we don't have a compromise in the rubber as far as it letting grease out. So this is pretty simple. We're just going to repeat the process and just put this back in where the other one was. Tighten the bolts and we're done. Just going to go ahead and put the tire back on it and spin these brakes, make sure they're nice and free, which they are. That's pretty much it. I'll start putting the tire back on now. Alright, moving on to the back brakes. Because they're all low. Place them at the same time. Makes sense to do front and rear at the same time. Make sure your brakes are always uniform. Now we got all the right tools here. We're actually in the rear is a 12 millimeter. It's a little bit smaller than the front. So same drill. We got a screw in the top, screw in the bottom. We're going to remove each one of those, pull this caliper off, put the new pads in, and put it back on. It's that simple. Here we go. Top is loose. Let's loosen the bottom. There we go. Wasn't too bad. Duralast ceramic brake pads I'm going with here. Get these AutoZone. I'm not sponsored by them. Cut these open here. Now these ones come with the indicator pieces separate, so I think this has to be popped on. So that's not a big deal. We'll just pay attention to when we pull off the current pads and make sure and put the indicator on the right pad. Should be a little notch for it. This little notch right here is for the pad, or for the indicator. Alright, so let's wiggle this off. Be careful of the springs like we talked about on the front. We don't want those to go flying anywhere. We're going to reuse those. Now you can buy a more expensive brake set that has all the springs and everything fresh in it. It comes with new metal here, new springs, but honestly these pads have like 50,000 miles on them, and I'm kind of on a budget, so I didn't want to spend the extra money. Now this inside pad is not so bad, but the outside pad is worn out a little bit more. But like I said, you can reuse these springs as long as they're not broken and they still have tension. So this indicator on this one I think is on the inside pad, or the back. For some reason these are wearing more on the front than on the back. Not sure why, but maybe somebody knows why that could be happening. You could leave a comment in the section, or leave a comment below as what might be causing that. These are Power Stop cross-drilled and slotted rotors, which I got off of Amazon. See, the vehicle has 125,000 miles on it now. I put these on at 69,000 miles, and these are Power Stop ceramic brake pads that came with the set. So not sure why they're wearing not the same, but if somebody has any ideas why that might be happening, feel free to drop a comment below and look into that. But they do stop fine. I don't have really any issues with them the stopping power or anything like that, so there's no complaints there. Just it's a little strange that they're not wearing evenly. They're very quiet though, and I don't have any kind of pulsing going on in the brakes. Only reason why I knew that these were low is because when I took it into Honda to have them do the transmission fluid like I talked about earlier, they of course they always do an inspection of everything to make sure everything looks good. It gives you any kind of like a list of things that might need to be addressed, which I appreciate. But like I said, I like to do a lot of my own work, so here we are. Just gonna line this pad up. There we go. Yeah, I'm curious if anybody has an idea why those pads are not wearing evenly. I'm all ears. Alright, so we got the pads on, nice and sturdy in there. So these pads don't have holes for the springs like the others did. That's interesting. Well, I guess we won't be using these springs. The Power Stop came with springs. These pads have holes in them on the ends, as you can see there, top and bottom, for springs, but these Duralast pads do not have springs. So we're just gonna use what we have. Just gonna push this cylinder back in, or this piston. There we go, got contact. It's just nice and easy. We're just going to push that piston back in. Don't want to go too fast. We don't want to. Like I mentioned before, when I was doing the front, I have the lid off of the brake reservoir, so there's no back pressure. So basically, it's pushing the fluid through the line and back up into the reservoir up underneath the hood. And that's it. That's all it needs. Inspect that piston, make sure there's no issues there. We can wipe off. No debris down in there. Like I said, if you want to use brake parts cleaner, that's a good idea. I don't have any with me at the moment. Okay, so now what we have to do is just slide this caliper back over these pads. And just like that, it's back together. Put some screws back in it. Line these up. Start them out. Top now. Alright, let's going to tighten these 12mm bolts back up, and we are done with this side. Good and snug. There we go. That's good enough.